October 1st, 2013, San Francisco. Inside the Glen Park Public Library, in the science fiction section, a young man sits alone at a table with his laptop open. He looks like every other person in that library. Quiet, focused, unremarkable, but at that exact moment, federal agents are closing in from every direction. Because the man at that table is allegedly the most wanted criminal on the internet. They've been hunting him for almost 2 years. They don't know his face. They don't know his real name. All they know is a username, Dread Pirate Robert. And in the next 60 seconds, they're about to find out that the most dangerous man on the dark web was hiding in plain sight, in a public library, reading. Here's the crazy part. This isn't a movie plot. This actually happened. And the story of how he got to that table and how the FBI finally caught up to him is one of the strangest manhunts in modern history. Let's rewind. 2 years earlier, in 2011, a 26-year-old guy from Austin, Texas, launched a website that would change the internet forever. His name was Ross Ulbricht. On paper, he looked like nobody special. A physics graduate, an idealist, someone who believed in libertarian ideas about freedom and government having too much control over people's lives. But Ross had built something the world had never seen before. A website called Silk Road. Think of it like an underground Amazon, except instead of books and electronics, people were buying and selling drugs anonymously from anywhere in the world. Here's how it actually worked and why nobody could touch it at first. Silk Road only existed on something called the dark web, accessed through a browser called Tor that bounced your connection through so many layers of encryption, tracing it back to a real location became almost impossible. Every transaction ran through Bitcoin, a currency most Americans had never even heard of yet, which meant there was no bank to subpoena, no credit card company to call. And it didn't feel like some sketchy back alley deal either. Buyers left reviews, sellers built reputations. It ran like a real business, complete with customer service and refund policies, except everything being sold was illegal. Here's what made it terrifying for law enforcement. Silk Road didn't operate like a normal website. It lived hidden behind layers of encryption that made it almost impossible to trace who was running it or where the servers even were. And it worked almost too well. Within a couple of years, Silk Road generated more than $1 billion in transactions. Not million, billion. Every single sale gave Ross a commission, and investigators would later estimate he personally pulled in more than $400 million just from those fees. Think about that for a second. A guy in his 20s, sitting behind a laptop, quietly building one of the most profitable criminal enterprises in internet history, and almost nobody knew his real name. He didn't even go by Ross online. He had a different identity, a username that would become legendary in law enforcement circles, Dread Pirate Roberts. He took the name from the movie The Princess Bride, where the title was passed down from person to person, so no one ever really knew who was behind the mask. It was clever, it was symbolic, and for the FBI, it was infuriating. Because that's exactly the problem they ran into. They didn't know if Dread Pirate Roberts was one person or several. They didn't know his nationality, his age, or what he looked like. All they had was a ghost. But here's where things get interesting. While federal agents were struggling to even confirm who they were chasing, Ross was becoming something else entirely behind the screen. He wasn't just running a marketplace anymore. He was becoming paranoid, powerful, and according to prosecutors, dangerous. As Silk Road grew, so did the threats against it. People tried to blackmail him, employees threatened to expose him, and according to court documents, Ross allegedly turned to something far darker than anyone expected from an idealistic physics grad. Prosecutors say he solicited multiple murders for hire, allegedly paying to have people killed who he believed were threats to his empire. Nearly $730,000, according to court records, spent trying to protect Silk Road by any means necessary. Now here's the twist nobody saw coming. Despite these allegations being presented at sentencing, Ross was never actually charged with those murder for hire crimes. To this day, it remains one of the most debated parts of his case. Was he really willing to have people killed, or was this prosecutor's painting the darkest possible picture to secure a harsher sentence? We don't know for certain, but what we do know is this: while all of that was happening behind the curtain, investigators were closing in from an angle nobody expected. Not through hacking, not through some genius cyber operation, through a mistake, a tiny, almost laughably small mistake. Years earlier, before Silk Road even existed, someone posted in an online forum asking for help with programming a project. That person used the username Altoid to promote what would eventually become Silk Road. Here's the part that should have been impossible to overlook, but almost was. In that same post, Altoid left behind a personal email address, and that email address contained something devastating. His real name, Ross Ulbricht. It took investigators years to connect these dots, buried in old forum posts from before Silk Road even launched. An ears investigator working the case, digging through mountains of old internet history, eventually found the thread that connected Altoid to Dread Pirate Roberts. One forgotten forum post. That's what cracked the case wide open. But knowing his name wasn't enough, they needed proof. They needed to catch him in the act, with the evidence in front of him, before he could delete everything. This is where the story gets almost unbelievable. Undercover agents had already gone further than anyone realized. One investigator managed to work his way into Silk Road's own inner circle, posing as a trusted employee, helping run the site's daily operations from the inside. For months, this agent was inside the walls of the very empire they were trying to bring down, quietly gathering clues, while Ross had no idea he was being watched from within his own team. Piece by piece, the digital ghost was becoming a real person. Chat logs revealed patterns matching Pacific Standard Time. A server tied to the site was traced all the way to Iceland and seized. Every clue was small on its own. Together, they were building a case nobody could deny. And then came October 1st, 2013. Agents had tracked Ross to San Francisco. They knew he was somewhere in the city, but they needed to catch him actively logged into Silk Road's most sensitive system, or he could simply deny everything. That's when they found him. Not in some underground bunker, not in a high-security apartment, in the Glen Park Public Library. Sitting in the science fiction section, laptop open, seemingly no different from anyone else studying or browsing the internet on a Tuesday afternoon. Nobody around him had any idea. The person quietly using library Wi-Fi next to them was allegedly running a billion-dollar criminal empire in real time. Here's the moment that made this arrest so unforgettable. Agents needed him to stay logged in. If he had even a second to react, he could have triggered an encryption wipe and destroyed the evidence instantly. So instead of storming in, they staged a distraction. A pretend argument broke out near him, drawing his attention away from the screen just long enough for an agent to grab the laptop before he could touch it. And there it was, right on the screen, the admin panel for Silk Road, a page investigators say was literally labeled Mastermind. 2 years of searching, millions of dollars in resources, undercover operations, server seizures, international tracking, and in the end, they found him doing something almost painfully ordinary. Reading, typing, existing quietly in public, exactly where nobody would think to look for the most wanted man on the dark web. Ross Ulbricht was arrested that day and charged with running a continuing criminal enterprise, drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit computer hacking. In 2015, he was convicted, and the sentence he received wasn't just severe, it was almost unthinkable. 2 life sentences, plus 40 years, without the possibility of parole. A physics graduate with idealistic beliefs about freedom was now going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. For over a decade, his case became a symbol, and the country split almost right down the middle over what he actually deserved. To some, he was a criminal responsible for enabling drug trafficking on a massive scale. Someone who built a system that made it easier than ever for dangerous substances to reach ordinary people, sometimes with fatal consequences. To others, especially in libertarian and internet freedom communities, he became something closer to a martyr, a young idealist, they argued, crushed by a justice system desperate to make an example out of him, given a sentence longer than some murderers received. His mother, Lynn Ulbricht, refused to let his story disappear quietly behind prison walls. For over a decade, she traveled, spoke publicly, and campaigned relentlessly relentlessly for his release, turning her son's case into one of the most talked about criminal justice debates in the country. And then, in a turn nobody would have predicted back in 2015, everything changed again. In January 2025, after 11 years in federal prison, Ross Ulbricht received a full and unconditional pardon. Let that sink in for a moment. A man sentenced to 2 life sentences, effectively told he would die behind bars, walk free. Today, Ross Ulbricht is no longer the ghost known as Dread Pirate Roberts. He's married, building a new life, reportedly expecting a child. The idealist turned fugitive, who built one of the most sophisticated criminal marketplaces the internet has ever seen, didn't die in prison like the system said he would. He got a second chance almost nobody believed was possible. And it all traces back to one library, one laptop, one quiet afternoon, where the most wanted man on the internet was caught doing the least suspicious thing imaginable, reading a book. So here's the question worth sitting with. If the smartest, most careful criminal mastermind of his era could be found simply existing in public, hiding in plain sight for years, how many secrets are sitting in a library, a coffee shop, or a quiet corner near you right now, waiting for one tiny mistake to bring them into the light?